Revolutionary greetings and a very warm welcome to all of you. And I was listening to Professor Vinayak standing there, and I thought that probably I'm standing there from last 2 decades, listening probably the similar revolutionary traits, the classical left way to deal with current politics, and the strategies or the possibilities that we all have for the tomorrow's time. So Professor Vinayak, or even for that matter, Harish, come up from that old tradition to deal with how to understand the current political crisis and what should be the role of organizations and the progressive people to deal with the kind of crisis that we all are struggling today. So the battle is old battle, and in the current times when this kind of crisis, the crisis which are around us, when we investigate, we find that we are all helpless, and we do not have much possibilities to overcome that crisis. And when Professor Chakravarty was suggesting that she may die in despair, and the hope which she started her life, that hope has completely shut down today, and there is no possibility to challenge the condition in a positive manner. So in that kind of a very, very pessimistic and depressing time, we are gathered here to speak on literature, to discuss something which we think is crucial and important for all of us. And the theme and idea that has been suggested to me to speak upon is about cinema and films. And again, for a very, very long time, you'll find that this particular domain was outside what they call serious academic discipline. Hardly people thought that cinema, media, popular culture should enter into university spaces, mainly the left spaces for that matter. And seen as part of the what they call the bourgeois cultural order, and hardly that kind of a deeper engagement with popular culture was seen in the earlier times. And even if you reflect upon the available film studies, the way film studies has developed in India, you will also find that those film studies are also dealing mostly with what they call cinema theories, or the ideas of representation, or some kind of Western philosophical tool to deal with how to examine the content and the text of a film. That kind of a larger, very methodological, serious approach to deal with the content and the text, that has dominated the cinema studies for a very, very long time. And in that kind of an approach, often the politics of cinema, the larger influence that cinema or media is doing with normal people, normal viewers, normal audience, that concern is always left out. That as I said, the philosophical, theoretical, very deep engagement with content and characters, or even for that matter filmmaking, in that larger approach you'll find that the political nature of cinema, that there is a political notion that cinema is a political art. Cinema also speaks about power, about domination, about hegemony, and therefore cinema should be seen as a part of a larger structural value, that it rebuilds, it reconnects with the structure and retain or sustain the continuation of the power. And therefore, when we say that cinema speaks to its time, that it is basically byproduct of the kind of a conditions in which we all are surviving or living. It is actually a fact that cinema, and therefore when you see the shifts, the changes, the notion of filmmaking or how different narratives are coming into cinema, you will find that probably this particular cinema is a response to that particular time. And therefore, the relationship of the contemporary to the filmmaking is always very important. And this is crucial. Why? Because probably we are also seeing what Professor Chakravarty just said, the kind of a cinema that we are seeing in the current time, the popular cinema, mainly films like Jawan or Animal, which of course I will not say that it is very different or distinct from the earlier cinema. Hindi cinema particularly has been sexist, patriarchal, violent, and distant from most of the what we call social concerns of our daily life. There was nothing, I don't say animal as an aberration to Hindi popular cinema. It's just a not, or even for that matter, just 2 weeks earlier, if you see Salar, terrible violent film. But violence, for that matter, patriarchy, naturalism, heroism of a male order is a convention. It's a historical convention, and we are just seeing a version of that in animals. So I don't feel that it is an aberration or a challenge to the way cinema has been produced in Indian context. The other aberration again, people are suggesting that probably the communal angle of cinema, the larger way that cinema is now preaching communalism, is preaching hardcore anti-Muslim values in their narratives, and hardly think that cinema has a responsibility to build a secular content and educate people for their secular responsibility. That part has completely down, and the kind of a nationalist, very jingoist and communal cinema that we are now seeing, and there are multiple examples of that. So that cinema is of course a very, very dangerous cinema. We must think critically when we are engaging with cinema as an art form, cinema as a popular cultural instrument. At that part of time, this way of dealing or producing films which are extremely dangerous, extremely problematic, which surely communalize society in a very, very dangerous way. While saying this, as I said, that probably for me, seeing cinema till current times doesn't suggest me that there is a grand change that's happened. That there is something kind of historical shift that one can see because of a political change. That is, of course, there, but more than that, there is something else. And therefore, probably when we think about the history of Indian cinema, or even for that matter, media, we'll find that probably this particular aspect that cinema is speaking to its time, speaking to the power, speaking through a kind of an ideological vantage point, that is a fact. And it has not changed till the current times. And in this kind of acceptance, in this kind of acknowledgement that cinema speaks to its time, we'll find that there is a continuous neglect and a stereotype vis-a-vis the marginalized communities. Mainly in my work, I try to examine the Dalit representation in Hindi cinema. So we'll find that there is a continuous neglect of this particular aspect, and whenever there is a presence of this aspect in cinema, it was stereotypically driven. And these two major points I will raise, and of course I will suggest what has changed in this particular point. And therefore, the idea of entertainment for a very long time, from the beginning of the filmmaking process in India, from Raja Harish Chandra to till Animal, you will find that the entertainment quotient was crucial, that it should entertain the people the way drama or theatre or music theatres were doing for a very, very long time in Indian history. So it was a kind of a it has a reciprocal relationship with the earlier tradition of entertainment, that entertainment is required and cinema will be an extension of similar entertainment. But we also find that when cinema started its kind of influence on society, the traditional entertainments were not part of the filmmaking process. The traditional entertainers, mainly the lower caste communities, like in Maharashtra, the Tamasha and the Lavani entertainers who were entertaining the people in a very, very significant manner, will find that when the actual filmmaking started coming up, when it emerged as a business, as an industry, we'll find that the conventional, traditional entertainers were not part of the industry. They were not making films, and they were not even given part as an artist, as a technicians, as a part of the larger cinema production. They were not at all there. And this exclusion of the conventional entertainers from this new business which is now very powerful and profitable, you'll find that division started very much there. And one of the major reasons for this division is, of course, that cinema at that part of time wanted that it should be engaged with the nationalist movement. For that matter, Dadasaheb Phalke, the first filmmaker who made more than 150 films at that part of time, thought that he is contributing cinema in the making of the national independence movement. That he will create a cultural orientation, he will educate people about their indigenous organic culture and challenge the larger modernization process through which the colonialism is trying to influence the people. And therefore it appears, for Phalke, it appears as a cultural nationalism project to bring myths, to bring Hindu mythological tales, to speak about deities and gods and multiple mythological tales and educate people that we are basically belonging to that particular tradition. And this aspect of cultural, making culture, cinema as a partner to build cultural nationalism. And that basically started in a very, very significant way. And in that you will find that probably they thought that the marginalized communities, mainly the Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasis, hardly had that kind of a range or qualification or legitimacy to speak about nationalism. And therefore, their concerns, their ideas and their political philosophy was avoided at that part of time. And for that matter, Ambedkar was such a significant leader during the national independence struggle. He was deliberating, discussing national issues with the grand old man of Indian history, Gandhi, at that part of time. You will find that his approach, his values, his concern for nation building are consistently being avoided in filmmaking. Further, you will also find that that particular time, especially 50s and 60s, was also seen as what they call the golden age of Indian cinema. Mainly people from socialist, progressive background. And Prof. Chakravarty also took a very important name called Bimal Roy. These people were making very important contribution in dealing what they called the art cinema, the progressive, not only entertainment, as most of the films were entertaining, but Bimal Roy or Mehboob Khan or Raj Kapoor were not only making entertaining films, but they also had a political value, some kind of a examination of the social and economic conditions of that part of time, and making working class as a prominent character within the films. The idea of poverty, again, Lobi Gazameen is a wonderful example, or many other films of that part of time, taking Raj Kapoor, that vagabond character, a migrant in the city in most of the films. So you'll find that these progressive filmmakers were trying to engage with the idea of working class, poor, the urban crisis, the idea of modernization, and in dealing with multiple narratives at that part of time. But you will also find in that particular narrative, which all these great filmmakers, including Ketan Mehta and later on B.R. Chopra, all these people created that aspect of progressive artistic cinema. But you will also find that even in that cinema, the caste question is completely neglected. Okay? And most importantly, it is in Bombay that they are making films. And Bombay is a city where the large migration population are from the Dalit background. And that particular city also saw what they call the Satyajit movement by Pune, the working class, first working class movement before the communists entered into city. The first movement of the working class was started by the Satyajit. Then, of course, Ambedkar's arrival and the arrival of the Dalit political or social organization. So Bombay actually was seeing, examining, experiencing the arrival of what they call caste-based, lower caste-based social, political, working class movements. And that neglect, that though all these people were making grand cinema, but the neglect or almost absent of this social narrative, that their hero is often an upper caste. You take Chetan Mehta, Chetananand or anybody. The hero is not from the socially marginalized community. The leading character, the protagonist, is never from a socially marginalized community. Though he is a migrant, though he is a poor, but he will tell a story which reflects the interest and the concerns of the social elites. And therefore, though there was a kind of a process in which cinema engaged with the idea of politics, but there was a deep neglect about multiple other issues which were, of course, prominent in the city's history. The second, of course, when another state took shape, like for that tragedy, what they call the art house cinema, the progressive cinema, the Benegals and Nilanis and Gautam Ghosh and Shyam Benegals, when they started making art house films, even you find that the caste question is surely coming in a very, very sincere manner. Like films like, as I said, Aghar, or Damul, or Par, or Sadgati. Satyajit is a very important film. When you see this film, you find that the caste question or the issue of untouchability or the question of feudal operation is very much prominent in the narrative. Well, you also find that this is the time, basically late 70s and early 80s, when these films were made. This is also the time, even again in Bombay, when Dalit Panthers is actually making a significant contribution to change the notion and the character of the Dalit victimhood. And they were suggesting that we are not just victims, but we are the vanguards of the current political process. We wanted to take lead in revolutionary struggles. We are the heroes and the champions and the leaders of the progressive social justice movement, and therefore our presence should not be seen as a victim, wretched, poor, backward people, but should be seen as a conscious being. That value, that change of character that was seen in political circles, mainly earlier with the arrival of Dalit Panthers and later with the arrival of Bahujan Samaj Party in 80s in Uttar Pradesh, this assertive Dalit politics, this assertive Dalit imagination, which was of course part of the larger political consciousness, will find that cinema is not even taking any cognizance of that. The cinema is simply avoiding this bigger picture, which was, again, as I said, within the same city, Bombay. Panthers were revolting, challenging, mobilizing people, dying, becoming rebels, and even atrocity. Everything is happening within that particular city. But the neglect of the what they call progressive cinema makers at that part of time, though they stereotyped the Dalit victimhood, that the Dalit woman is a red body, that they are poor, that they are wretched, and do not have the agency to challenge the feudal or the political order. That wretched sense or subjectivity of the Dalit identity was continuously portrayed or reproduced in the art house cinema. And therefore, for a very, very long time, these two issues dominated what they called the social issues in cinema making. One, a consistent neglect of caste, and particularly the Dalit question, for a very, very long time. And whenever it came on screen, whenever it was portrayed on screen, you will find that till early 90s, the cinema was typically stereotypical. It was mainly about victimhood, poverty, and agency-lessness of the Dalit bodies, and there was no hopeful arrival of a political Dalit on screen, which actually is not politically correct. Politically, you see that the Panthers or BSP in Uttar Pradesh were making those inroads. The last is, of course, the change, the shift in this particular narrative. And this shift has come up with the arrival of what we call the Dalit Bahujan filmmakers on screen. That after a long time, probably maybe because of the state policies of reservation or economic development or multiple other progresses, that there is a significant small Dalit middle class available in India today. They are also in universities, they are also in bureaucracy, they are also doing some retail businesses, they are also occupying some land here and there. So that small Dalit middle class, which has now come up, probably the new generation within that middle class is also entering into cinema studies, is also entering into filmmaking business, and this particular generation is coming up with extraordinary cinema. And I will just give 2 or 3 examples of the cinema. One is, of course, you must watch Ranjit's films in Tamil Nadu, Tamil films from Madras to Kabali to Kala to these recent films that are coming up. You'll find that the way he engaged with the caste question and the Dalit character is completely distinct from all the characters that were there in the earlier times. You'll find that he is trying to build what they call a Dalit hero. A hero which is not an alpha male hero like animal, but a very conscious being who understands his social and political responsibilities and wish to bring a social and a political change. Okay, that kind of a revolutionary, radical hero in his narrative. In most of the films you'll find that somewhere, though it is a male-centric and the tinge of patriarchy is there in that narrative, but you will find that the politics is right. The politics about the social and the political change. Second important filmmaker that one must engage with is of course Nagaraj Manjule. From his earlier documentary called Pistulia to another very important film which got the national award at that part of time, Pandri, to his extremely popular film called Sairat, which is till date the biggest hit in Marathi film industry. It did at that part of time the business of around 150 crore. So that film, which basically changed and challenged the way caste, Dalit narratives or the question of dignity were portrayed on cinema. And therefore, these two filmmakers set up some kind of a benchmark that how Dalit question or caste question should be portrayed in such a way that it will not only seen as a documentary but also entertain the people. So this engagement between art house, politics and entertainment. If you want to examine that, probably Ranjit's film and Nagaraj Manjule's films are the exceptional example. And there are so many now, and Vetri Maran's films, or for that matter, Masurkar's film, there are so many new examples that are now sincerely coming up. This change is also seen on the OTT platforms. And multiple OTT narrative web series are now picking up the Dalit or the tribal or the caste issues with some kind of a nuances. Nuances in the sense that they are not only thinking that Dalits are wretched and poor and victim, but also capable, agency-laden people, that they can also think about their future order with their own rationality. So this change, this kind of a subjective change in the characteristic is a very, very important characteristic. But though I can give a kind of a short mapping of this journey, but and there is also kind of a suggestion that probably there is something called an arrival of a Dalit genre to understand and examine cinema today, which is distinct from, as I said, the left liberal way of dealing with society based on working class and poor, or the nationalist historiography based on this kind of a larger patriotic way of dealing with history, or even for any other model of dealing with how to narrate a good story. Whether this very nascent, very young, very recent development called the Dalit genre of cinema, will it democratize the film? Okay? And in most of the given time, when somebody asks me this question, I also suggest that it is almost impossible. Okay, it will be a peripheral, it will be a marginal trend, it will be just a kind of an aberration in the large, grand history of cinema making. India is a country where we produce 2,000 films every year. And that grand system, structure, this one or two narratives here and there is not going much sense, and probably it will be just, as I said, a kind of a small reference in film studies business. And therefore probably one also needs to think about how to democratize media and cinema, rather than just thinking that one or two, we can celebrate one or two such chapters of Indian history. I think there is a need to understand that media industry, cinema, cultural industry is continuously being dominated, perpetuated by the interest of the social elites, continuously. With all channels, all news channels, all print media, you take everything, you will find that the domination, even if you make a division between the left and the right, you will find in both these pairs, the domination is with the social elites, that there is no much democracy within that particular sphere. And therefore, probably it is required that the media culture, the continued domination of the social elite need a democratization, that more people from the marginalized communities, mainly Dalit, Adivasi and OBCs, should participate not only in the political front, but also non-political front like cultural industry, mainly media and cinema making. And that can create some kind of a churning in which new stories, the stories which are belonging to the people, which are very much connected to the social realities, to the everyday happening at the ground level, those stories can come up, and that can create a new version of Indian cinema, which will not only be entertaining, but which will come with some kind of a responsibility, some kind of politics, some kind of an idea that cinema can change the world. Thank you very much for this.